You are tired, aren't you? Tired of chasing a happiness that never arrives. You wake up and feel an emptiness. You go to sleep and it's still there. And the most ironic thing is that the more you try to get rid of this weight, the more you force a smile, the more you repeat those positive phrases you read on the internet, the deeper you sink. And maybe no one tells you this clearly, but Dostoevsky did. And he knew that this modern obsession with being happy can become a trap disguised as a solution. He wrote, "Man only likes to recount his misfortunes. Happiness does not enter into his calculations." But this isn't about rejecting joy or embracing perpetual suffering. It's about something more profound. Authentic happiness cannot be pursued like a prize. It emerges when you stop running away from reality and start engaging with life as it actually is, not as you wish it would be. And that's where most people fail, because you are taught to avoid difficulty at all costs, to numb your discomfort with distractions, with empty promises, with unattainable goals. But Dostoevsky was not afraid of examining the full spectrum of human experience. He dove into it. He looked into the eyes of human struggle and found there not despair, but meaning, real meaning. Because suffering, contrary to what you've been told, can be the catalyst for genuine transformation. But for that, you need to stop, breathe, and face an uncomfortable truth. Maybe you are suffering not because something is fundamentally wrong with you, but because you are trying to live according to someone else's definition of a good life. Today, being happy has become an obligation. It's everywhere in advertisements, on social media, in motivational speeches, as if life should be an endless sequence of perfect moments, spontaneous laughter, constant achievements, and forced gratitude, sadness, doubt, fatigue. All this has become synonymous with personal failure. If you are sad, the message goes, it's because you don't know how to live properly. If you are anxious, it's because you're not vibrating at the right frequency. This is what I call the tyranny of manufactured happiness. It does not liberate, it oppresses. Dostoevsky saw this dynamic before our contemporary world perfected it. In his novels, he exposes what happens when humans try to shape their existence around artificial ideals that deny fundamental aspects of human nature. In Notes from Underground, he talks about the man who rejects any system that forces him to be rationally happy. He denounces the trap of a world where pain is seen as a defect rather than an essential part of being human. Man likes to build, but he also likes to destroy. Why? Because he has will, because he is free. This sentence reveals something important. Perhaps what truly harms us is not difficulty itself, but the denial of it, the insistence that we must always be up, always positive, always moving forward. Look at how we live today. We have created a world where everything must be beautiful, efficient, and positive. Social media are showcases where suffering is edited out, where everyone appears to have found their purpose, maintains perfect routines, and possesses unshakable self-esteem. But this is performance, not reality. Meet Anna, a 28-year-old marketing professional who has done everything right. She graduated with honors, landed a prestigious job, maintains a curated Instagram presence showing her living her best life, practices daily gratitude journaling, and can recite every popular self-help mantra. Yet despite checking every box on society's happiness checklist, Anna wakes up every morning with a tightness in her chest she can't explain. She's not clinically depressed. She's been screened. She's not anxious in a diagnosable way. She's just hollow. Empty in a way that terrifies her because it suggests that everything she's been taught about how to live might be fundamentally flawed. Anna's breaking point came during a team-building retreat. While everyone else seemed genuinely excited about trust falls and motivational speakers, Anna felt like an alien observing human behavior from outside. She was going through all the motions, saying all the right things, smiling at all the appropriate moments, but inside, she felt nothing. That night, alone in her hotel room, she broke down not from sadness, but from exhaustion. Exhaustion from pretending, from performing, from trying to align her authentic feelings with what she was supposed to feel. In a moment of desperation, she searched online, "Why am I not happy when I should be?" and discovered Dostoevsky's work. One quote stopped her. "The soul is healed by being with children." Wait, that wasn't quite it. She found another. "Man only likes to recount his misfortune." And another. "Suffering is the sole origin of consciousness." These weren't empty affirmations. They were acknowledgments of something she'd never been given permission to feel. That maybe constant happiness isn't the goal. Maybe authentic living. For Dostoevsky, suffering is not a punishment to be avoided at all costs. It's a teacher, a force that reveals who we really are when all the masks fall away. He did not see pain as an accident of bad luck, but as an unavoidable dimension of conscious existence. And this is precisely what our contemporary culture refuses to accept, that difficulty can be meaningful. Now, let me be extremely clear here. Dostoevsky was not advocating for seeking out suffering, for remaining in abusive situations, or for refusing treatment when clinical depression or anxiety disorders are present. That would be a dangerous misreading. What he understood is that when difficulty inevitably arrives, as it does in every human life, the way we relate to it determines whether it destroys us or transforms us. Take Raskolnikov from Crime and Punishment as an example. A man who tries to justify murder through a rational philosophy of moral superiority. He believes he can transcend ethical constraints, that he is above ordinary human limitation. But it is the suffering that follows his crime, the guilt that corrodes him, the psychological fever that consumes him, the delirium that forces confrontation with truth, that gradually reconnects him with his humanity. Suffering and pain are always mandatory for a broad consciousness and a deep heart. Dostoevsky leaves no doubt. Those who feel deeply live fully. But in our contemporary world, suffering is immediately pathological. Sadness is diagnosed as a chemical failure, existential questioning as dysfunction. And certainly, there are clinical contexts that absolutely require professional mental health care. But Dostoevsky warns us of a different danger: dehumanizing all pain, trying to silence every uncomfortable feeling with quick fixes and ready-made answers. Dostoevsky understood, like few others, the abyss between what a human being desires and what they can bear to face honestly. He knew that a person lies to themselves with terrifying ease, especially when it comes to their own happiness, and that is where a specific kind of suffering emerges. The pain that arises from internal dishonesty, from a desperate attempt to appear well while everything inside is crumbling. In Notes from Underground, the protagonist denounces the absurdity of reason as the absolute guide of life. He mocks the idea that if a human being knows what is good for them, they will always choose the best path. No, for Dostoevsky, humans are complex, contradictory, sometimes self-destructive, and precisely for that reason, the attempt to turn life into a simple equation of pleasure and reward is an insult to the depth of the human soul. Man likes to live his own life, He does not want to live a prefabricated life. You have noticed this, even if you cannot fully explain it. That emptiness you feel when following all the rules, maintaining appearances, working hard, saying that everything is fine. Even after doing everything right, something still feels missing. That sensation of playing a role, smiling at the mirror but with a silent scream trapped inside. This is what Dostoevsky would call artificial existence. A performance designed to hide the fear we have of facing our authentic experience. And the worst part, society rewards this theater. You gain likes, compliments, promotion, but deep down you are paying a high price. The price of distancing yourself from your own truth. Because when you choose to believe in the illusion of constant positivity, you begin to silence your legitimate concerns, your sincere questions about meaning, your search for something real. And this generates a dangerous type of suffering. Denied, buried, unacknowledged pain that cannot be expressed because it doesn't fit the image you need to maintain. Anna's relationship with Dostoevsky's ideas wasn't immediate enlightenment. It was uncomfortable, challenging, sometimes frustrating. She started with Crime and Punishment, and initially she hated it. This is so depressing, she thought. Where's the solution? Where's the action plan? But she kept reading. And slowly something shifted. She began recognizing herself not in Raskolnikov's crime, but in his initial mindset. The belief that if he just thought hard enough, planned carefully enough, optimized perfectly enough, he could transcend ordinary human limitations and struggles. She saw how that rationalist approach, that attempt to live purely through the intellect, while denying the messy emotional and moral dimensions of existence, had led to catastrophe. Then she read The Idiot, and Prince Mishkin's character confused her. He wasn't successful by any modern metric. He was vulnerable, sometimes naive, deeply affected by others' suffering. Yet he possessed something Anna realized she'd lost: authenticity. He didn't perform goodness, he embodied it, even when it cost him so. The turning point came when Anna made a radical decision. For 1 week, she would stop performing happiness. She wouldn't fake enthusiasm in meetings, wouldn't post anything on social media that wasn't completely genuine, wouldn't say "I'm fine" when she wasn't. The first few days were terrifying. Without the performance, who was she? But gradually, something unexpected happened. When she stopped pretending, she created space for real feelings to emerge. And yes, some of those feelings were uncomfortable. Grief over time wasted, anger at having been sold a false vision of what life should be, fear about what authentic living might require of her. But beneath those difficult emotions was something she hadn't felt in years. Aliveness. Real, undeniable, authentic aliveness. I want you to pause and honestly examine your own life. How much of your daily experience is authentic? And how much is performance? How often do you say "I'm fine" when you're not? How many of your goals are actually yours versus expectations you've internalized from others? Here's what I'm not suggesting. I'm not suggesting you abandon all structure, quit your job, or reject every social convention. I'm not romanticizing suffering or suggesting you should seek out pain. That would be deeply misguided. What I am suggesting is that you examine whether your pursuit of happiness has become a way of avoiding authentic engagement with your actual life. Dostoevsky's insight isn't that we should be miserable. It's that authentic living sometimes includes difficulty, and that difficulty can be meaningful rather than merely negative if we're willing to face it honestly. Here's a reflective exercise. Write down 3 things you're supposed to want, according to social expectations, family pressure, or cultural messaging. Then write down 3 things you actually want when you're completely honest with yourself. Notice where these lists diverge. The gap between them is often where suffering lives, not because your real desires are wrong, but because you've been trying to force yourself to want what you think you should want. Share in the comments one area where you suspect you've been living inauthentically, where you've been performing rather than being. This isn't about judgment, it's about recognition. Dostoevsky believed in an idea that is as powerful as it is counterintuitive. True human freedom begins not when we escape difficulty, but when we stop running from it. And this goes against everything you have been taught. From an early age, you were conditioned to think that freedom means doing whatever you want, feeling whatever is most comfortable, choosing the most pleasurable path. But Dostoevsky turns this logic inside out. For him, real freedom begins when you stop fleeing from reality and start consciously choosing what you are willing to face for something that matters. Take the case of Sonia in Crime and Punishment, a young woman who, facing poverty and family desperation, makes an impossibly difficult choice. She is not portrayed as a passive victim. She is perhaps the most powerful example of existential freedom in all of Dostoevsky's work, because she carries difficulty with dignity, because she does not deny reality but faces it directly, and because she maintains her capacity for love and faith, even in the midst of degradation. This is the paradox. The more you try to avoid all discomfort, the more of a slave you become. A slave to your image, to others' expectations, to your desperate need for approval, for relief, for control. But when you can look at your actual life situation, including its difficulties, and say, yes, I see this clearly, and I choose how I will respond to it, something changes. You reclaim agency. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become someone who suffers, yes, but who chooses what to do with that suffering. Freedom, then, is not the absence of difficulty. It is the conscious capacity to choose your relationship to it. Freedom is not constant comfort. It is depth, truth, the end of exhausting pretense, and the beginning of authentic existence. Now, let's address something crucial. How do you actually live with this understanding? How do you integrate Dostoevsky's insights without falling into nihilism or using them as an excuse to avoid addressing genuine mental health issues that require professional care? First, recognize the difference between existential suffering and clinical depression. Existential suffering is the discomfort that comes from living inauthentically, from confronting life's inherent uncertainties, from grappling with questions of meaning. This type of difficulty can be transformative when approached consciously. Clinical depression, on the other hand, is a medical condition that affects neurotransmitters, sleep, appetite, and functioning. If you're experiencing persistent symptoms that interfere with daily life, please seek professional help. Dostoevsky's philosophy doesn't replace therapy or medication when they're needed. Second, understand that accepting difficulty doesn't mean passively tolerating harmful situations. If you're in an abusive relationship, a toxic work environment, or a genuinely destructive situation, Dostoevsky's insights are not suggesting you should just accept your suffering. They're suggesting you face reality honestly, which often means acknowledging you need to make changes, and then having the courage to do so. Third, recognize that authentic living is a practice, not a destination. Anna didn't read Dostoevsky and suddenly have everything figured out. She began a gradual process of learning to distinguish between productive discomfort, the kind that comes from growth and authenticity, and destructive suffering, the kind that comes from staying in situations that genuinely harm her. She started therapy not to fix herself, but to understand herself better. She learned that authentic living sometimes means disappointing people who've grown accustomed to her performance. She discovered that real peace comes not from having no problems, but from no longer lying to herself about the problems she does have. What if you stopped trying to be happy? Not forever, not as a life philosophy of misery, but just for a moment. What if you stopped trying to fix, optimize, and improve yourself constantly? What would remain? Perhaps an emptiness, perhaps a silence you have never truly sat with, perhaps pain that has been waiting to be acknowledged since childhood. But Dostoevsky believed that it is in that moment when you drop all masks and face existence honestly that something real finally becomes possible. Maybe you are on the brink of that now. Perhaps everything you have lived until now has brought you to this point. The exhaustion of trying to meet an impossible standard. And if that is the case, then there is genuine hope. Because from here, the question changes. It shifts from how can I be happy to how can I live authentically, even when it's difficult. And that is the key. True peace, that which doesn't depend on external validation, achievements, or circumstances, is not found in the manufactured happiness that's been sold to you. It's found in something much deeper, quieter, and more sustainable. It is in the acceptance that life includes difficulty, and that difficulty can be meaningful. When you stop fighting against what you actually feel, and start listening to what your experience is trying to teach you, it transforms. Pain ceases to be purely an enemy. It becomes information. It stops being only a burden. It becomes a teacher. Dostoevsky saw this even in the most brutal experiences. In The Idiot, Prince Mishkin carries his sensitivity and vulnerability as gifts, not defects. Even though they make him suffer, he refuses to betray his authentic nature for false peace. The truly strong soul, according to Dostoevsky, is not the one that never feels difficulty, but the one that refuses to betray what it genuinely feels in exchange for a comfortable life. Anna's transformation wasn't dramatic or cinematic. It was gradual, sometimes frustrating, often invisible to others. 6 months after her hotel room breakdown, her life looked surprisingly similar from the outside. Same job, same apartment, same basic routine. But internally everything had shifted. She still experienced difficult emotions, sadness, anxiety, frustration, but her relationship to them changed. Instead of seeing them as problems to be immediately solved or evidence of personal failure, she began treating them as information. What is this feeling trying to tell me? What am I learning about what matters to me? She quit Instagram, not out of moral superiority, but because she realized the constant performance was exhausting and inauthentic. Some friends drifted away, confused by her refusal to engage in toxic positivity. But other relationships deepened as she became more genuinely herself. Most importantly, she stopped measuring her worth by her happiness level. Some days were hard, and that was okay. Some mornings she woke up with existential dread, and instead of immediately trying to positive think her way out of it, she sat with it, journaled about it. Sometimes just let it be there without making it mean something was fundamentally wrong with her. She discovered what Dostoevsky knew, that a life rich with meaning is not the same as a life free from difficulty. That depth and authenticity sometimes require us to feel things we'd rather avoid. That transformation happens not when we finally achieve constant happiness, but when we stop needing constant happiness to feel okay about being alive. The soul is healed by being with children, Dostoevsky wrote, and Anna finally understood. Not because children are always happy, but because they're authentic. They cry when sad, laugh when delighted, exist without the exhausting self-consciousness that makes adults perform emotions rather than experience them. We have reached a point that few can attain, the place where truth finally reveals itself. And it does not come with lights, nor with certainties, nor with euphoria. It comes in quiet reckoning, in that moment when you stop resisting and understand that life is not meant to be conquered, optimized, or perfected. It is meant to be lived, with all its complexity, with its mixture of joy and sorrow, with its inevitable difficulties alongside its genuine moments of connection. Dostoevsky understood this profoundly. He did not write to comfort or flatter. He wrote to confront us with reality. And if his books remain relevant today, it is because they say what most contemporary culture refuses to acknowledge, that suffering is part of being conscious, and that fleeing from it creates more suffering than facing it ever could. But let me be absolutely clear about what I'm suggesting and what I'm not. I am not suggesting you should seek out suffering, remain in harmful situations, or refuse appropriate mental health care. That would be a dangerous distortion of these ideas. What I am suggesting is that authentic living sometimes includes difficulty, and that difficulty is not always a problem to be fixed, but sometimes a teacher to be heard. If this message has resonated with you, I invite you to take one small step. Identify one area of your life where you've been performing rather than being honest. Not to judge yourself, but simply to recognize. Then consider what it might look like to bring a bit more authenticity to that area, even if it's uncomfortable. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to stop performing," if this message touched something real in you. And if you know someone who is exhausted from the constant pressure to be happy all the time, share this video with them. Sometimes, knowing we're not alone in questioning the happiness imperative is the first step toward authentic living. Before you go, remember, the next video continues this exploration. True transformation doesn't happen in one conversation. It unfolds gradually, through continued reflection and courageous honesty. Your journey toward authentic living doesn't end here. It begins